Well, it's time for a new video, and saw a story today that was about a school, and one of the teachers had sent a letter home saying the kids could opt out of Black History Month. Of course, the superintendent clamped that down immediately and said, "There's no such thing. Children will learn history and all of history," and that letter was said erroneously. But it does remind us of this annual ritual that we go through about Black history. So I do want to address it. It could be wrapped up in CRT, but today I'm going to focus on one of its most powerful um, allies. Allies is the wrong way to say it, but uh, it's definitely one of the part of the point that I want to make, which is the person that's very influential for the lives and the freedoms that Black people enjoy is Adolf Hitler. And so it's not talked about enough, but it's an irony for me to constantly see angry white people pulling out swastikas or wearing swastikas or whatever else and focusing on blonde hair and blue eyes. So we're going to kind of complicate some of these ideas for you a little bit. Uh, any video I make, I already understand and know what you know. What I'm trying to do ever is add complexity and facts that you may not have been told so that you can do your own research and think about it in a broader stance. So, crediting Hitler in Black History Month will give you some idea, not that you know better than me because you don't, but why I would say it. So, the difference is that Hitler and the fallout from World War II, of course, sent home millions of Black soldiers from the United States and Africa. These men and women would later become the catalyst for these liberation movements, the civil rights movement back here in the U.S. in the 50s, going into the 60s, and of course the decolonization of Africa by these weakened European powers who had exhausted themselves fighting Hitler and now needed to find a way to decouple themselves to some degree while retaining power, which has sent us into this current era of neocolonialism and things like that. But without Hitler's efforts, uh, my life would be more difficult, and the life of millions of other Africans would be more difficult because we are not talking about countries that were good or nice to Black people. Prior to Hitler, Black people in the United States were escaping to Germany so that they could eat in restaurants and live like a normal human being. Much is made about the sterilization, but that's mainly from African or Black French troops and German women getting together and their descendants being sterilized because they were the Rhineland bastards. So that was part of the master race idea. But the whole idea of waving swastikas around in celebration of a man who, if he was any other race, would be hated more than he is. Put it that way. For all the white people he killed, there's 6 million Jews, but of course, tens of millions of people who were not Jews died in World War II. So this is not something that's that easy to understand of why people who are white celebrate the person who's responsible for the death of so many white people. Well, he cared about blonde hair and blue eyes. Hitler attacked Europe. Hitler fought England, France, Poland. Any white people there? Any blonde hair, blue eyed people there? Russia. And he was allied with Italy. People who just got the white franchise in this country 30 minutes ago. And Japan, who are not white people at all. So he's killing countries and people and as many millions of blonde hair white people that he can, and allied with an Asian, and a swarthy white group? Does that complicate your understanding of the blonde hair, blue eyed thing? And so there's Europe. The United States had no qualms with Hitler or any of his ideas. His ideas were sprang from Canadian and US eugenics ideas. And the American eugenist said, at least he has the courage to go through with it. So the United States had no issues with Hitler. Pearl Harbor happened. And the United States attacked Japan. And Hitler said, no, you blonde-haired, blue-eyed motherfuckers in America will not attack my Asian friends. I declare war on you. And that's how America ended up getting in any type of fight with Hitler. Not for his ideas, not for hatred, not, hey, he's killing Jews, let's go do something about it. None of that. None of that ruffled a feather in this country. None of that bothered an American. Most of that was found out by the time the Russians won the war and started to liberate those camps. Because he made the same mistake as Napoleon, which is fighting Russia in the wintertime. And that's why Russia's expansion is all across Eastern Europe, all the way up into the middle of Germany. And the United States and Western Europe basically got those countries back. So that's the difference. So you have to understand that I have more reason to wave a swastika around. Jews have more reason to wave a swastika around than an American white person. It's absolute lunacy for you to wave that out there to taunt Black Lives Matter or to aggravate Jews or anything else because you're a damn fool. If Hitler was successful, you would not be here. My life may be a little bit easier than it is because German POWs, who ultimately totaled up to 500,000 in this country, were treated better than black soldiers who were fighting the Nazis in this country. They ultimately had to take on jobs and work on plantations alongside black people in this country, but they were brought in to eat and talk, and white people would go watch them play soccer and everything else while black people served them. That's this country. So as bad as Hitler was as far as race, you have his sterilization going on during the Tuskegee experiment. This is not something that black people had an interest in. After World War II, black soldiers came back to be lynched for wearing their uniforms. And the civil rights movement in this country was fought tooth and nail. To this day, my grandson will be old enough to vote in the 28 election. He might not have a right to vote because 19 states and 52 U.S. senators refuse to enshrine his right to vote, while those 19 states and others work on curtailing his right to vote. Here going into the 2030s. So you can imagine in the 1920s and the 1930s how many rights black people have. Right now, racism was a long time ago. I'm projecting into the future the things that we're having to go through in the next election. Every 100 years, we're fighting for the same rights we already had. The rights they were fighting for in the 1960s were the same fucking rights they got in the 1860s after the Civil War. But they went through a period like we're going through now. You go through Reconstruction, then you go through Deconstruction. They got rid of the Voting Rights Bill and have been rolling back rights to vote ever since in the past several years. And it only has been amplified because Republicans have not won the popular vote since 2004. And if Trump runs again, he'll probably lose for the third time in a row, despite the governors in these countries, in these states, saying you can't even drink water in line while we get rid of all the polling stations. So that's the backdrop. I'm black, Had Hitler won the war, how does that change my life? How does that change my situation? He is inadvertently responsible for half the rights I have. He is inadvertently responsible for the liberation of black people around the world. Wasn't his intent, wasn't his goal, but white people trying to save themselves and using black bodies again trained and prepared millions of black people to go home and fight for their freedom. And had he won, I'd speak German. But I don't care which one of these racist slave languages I speak natively. But you might not exist because he may have continued on killing more and more white people who were fighting against him. He may have invaded this country, and your grandparents or great grandparents may have fought against him and died, and you wouldn't exist. I'm black. I'd be fine because you're trying to say Hitler was an evil racist. And what the hell do you think black people came home to in Northern Africa and North America? Do you think I'm drawing some broad distinction between German evil racism and American evil racism? No. People killing black people wholesale, experimenting on black people wholesale. I don't have a preference. I prefer black people not to be mistreated by anybody. But as far as having a preference that good thing Hitler was defeated so black people could be lynched in this country, no. So inadvertent black hero. Congratulations, Hitler, for this posthumous award.